He was tall, handsome, and commanding, one of Hollywood's brightest stars. Jeff Chandler wasn't just a leading man, he was a symbol of strength, mystery, and timeless charisma. But in 1961, at the height of his fame, his story ended suddenly, and suspiciously. The headlines offered a clean explanation, but not everyone was convinced. Too many questions were left unanswered. Too many details never added up. So why, after all these decades, are people still whispering about what really happened to Jeff Chandler? This isn't just a story about a star who rose too high, it's about a truth Hollywood never wanted to face. Growing up in a working-class Jewish family where money was tight and the future was uncertain, Chandler showed artistic talent and a strong interest in the performing arts from a very young age. He loved acting and telling stories. These interests were hard to pursue at a time when families were focused on just surviving, but Chandler's determination set him apart. He didn't let hard times stop him after finishing school at Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, a place known for. Chandler decided to follow his dream of becoming an actor and enrolled at the Fagan School of Dramatic Art in New York City. There he began to study acting more seriously and took part in school productions where he learned voice and movement techniques and gained confidence in his abilities. It was clear that Chandler was not only passionate about acting but also dedicated to getting better. He knew that talent alone wasn't enough for him, he needed skill, discipline, and training. When World War II broke out, Chandler was already an actor. Chandler put his acting dreams on hold to serve his country. He joined the U.S. Army and was stationed in the Aleutian Islands, which were very far away and hard to get to. Life in the military was hard, but it gave him structure and mental toughness that he needed. When the war was over, Chandler went back to civilian life, and like many veterans, he had to figure out what to do next. For Chandler, the answer was clear: acting. He started working in radio, where his rich, deep voice quickly got attention. In the 1940s, radio was still a major form of entertainment. Chandler's baritone voice stood out, and he got regular work in radio dramas playing different characters. These roles helped him gain experience and build a reputation, and his voice became his calling card, opening doors that eventually led him to movies. Chandler's big break in movies came in 1948 with a small but powerful role as a tough gangster in Johnny a Clark. The role suited his strong voice and quiet intensity, and even though it wasn't a lead role, it got people in the industry talking. Studio executives and film critics noticed him. Soon, he started getting offers for bigger roles. The real turning point came with Broken Arrow in 1950. Chandler played Cochise, an Apache chief. The role was difficult and complicated, but Chandler gave it his all. He played Cochise not as a stereotype, but as a proud, smart, and caring leader. It was a performance full of dignity and strength. At a time when Native Americans were often portrayed unfairly in movies, Chandler's respectful and human portrayal was a big change. Even though his rise to fame was impressive, what happened next in his personal life was anything but smooth. After Jeff Chandler became famous in the early 1950s, his life became a constant cycle of work and pressure. He quickly became one of Universal Pictures' most reliable stars, the studio trusted him to give strong performances, and he rarely let them down. But his success came at a cost that hurt both his health and his personal life. Chandler signed a demanding contract with Universal Studios that required him to make 2 movies a year. It might not seem like much, but each movie took months to plan, film, promote, and finish. Chandler was also involved in singing performances and public appearances. These weren't just side projects, they were part of his public image and took up even more of his time. There were constant meetings, rehearsals, and travel. Chandler also ran his own production company, which added another layer of stress. By the mid-1950s, his busy schedule became too much for him to handle. It was clear that he was constantly tired. At the time, Chandler's wife, actress Marjorie Hosel, said he would sometimes fall asleep in the middle of conversations, even in public. His tiredness wasn't just physical, it was also emotional. He was so worn out by his duties that even when he was physically present, he wasn't always mentally or emotionally involved. It was like he was always thinking about the next job or the next deadline. Jeff Chandler married Marjorie Hosel. Marjorie in 1946, just as his Hollywood career was beginning to take off. She had been acting herself, but she eventually stepped out of the spotlight to focus on their family. They had two daughters, Hamie, born in 1947, and Donna, born in 1949. At first glance, they seemed like the perfect Hollywood family, but there were serious problems in the background. Their marriage had many ups and downs. They divorced in 1951 but tried to get back together, but the same problems kept coming back in 1954. They broke up again, and Marjorie filed for divorce, saying the marriage was beyond repair. One of the main problems she pointed out was Chandler's extreme exhaustion. She said he wasn't just tired, he was constantly unavailable physically and emotionally. She said he would disappear into his work and leave little time for their relationship or their children. The couple tried to fix things again in 1955 and briefly got back together, but it didn't last. In 1957, while filming a movie in Italy, Chandler had an affair with actress Esther Williams's behavior was the last straw for Marjorie. She filed for divorce again, this time for good. The divorce was finalized in 1959. During the court proceedings, Chandler's income was revealed. He made about $250,000 in 1957, which was a lot of money at the time. He was paid $60,000 per film in 1957 and $75,000 per film in 1958. He also made money from singing and personal appearances, but even though he made a lot of money, he wasn't financially stable because of agent fees, manager commissions, legal fees, and other costs. Chandler agreed to pay over $2,100 a month in alimony and $500 a month in child support as part of the divorce settlement. He also gave a lump sum of $100,000. These numbers show how seriously the courts took his financial responsibilities, but they also show how stressed he was. Keeping up his public image and family duties while juggling a high-pressure career left him stretched thin in every way. Chandler's emotional and physical breakdown became more obvious as, over time, he was seen falling asleep on set or at social events. This wasn't because he was lazy, he was just tired. His co-workers and close friends said he seemed emotionally worn out. Instead of spending time with his family during breaks, he would go into his business office. His wife said he spent all of his free time working, writing, planning, or running his business. Even at home, he wasn't really present, and Marjorie later said she got an ulcer. She had a physical sign of how deeply the emotional toll of their relationship affected her. She wasn't just hurt by Chandler's absence, she was suffering from it. By the late 1950s, it was clear that Jeff Chandler's personal life was falling apart. His fame and success had come at the cost of his health and happiness. Fans admired and respected him in Hollywood, but behind the scenes he was struggling to keep everything together, and just when things were looking up. A shocking romance and public scandal would put his personal life even more in the spotlight, along with rumors of affairs and love affairs. Jeff Chandler may have seemed calm and sure of himself on screen, but his real life was much more complicated. After his marriage to Marjorie ended, Chandler's love life started getting more attention, especially from the tabloid press, which was becoming more hostile in the 1950s. For someone who was already under a lot of work pressure, the added. The attention on his love life made things harder. One of the most talked about parts of Chandler's life started in 1957 while he was filming Raw Wind in Eden in Italy. On set, he started an affair with actress Esther Williams, who was a former swimming champion and major Hollywood star, quickly became a central figure in Chandler's life and the media. Their relationship wasn't exactly a secret, the press quickly found out, and Chandler's wife knew the marriage was over. Williams would later marry Chandler. In her autobiography, The $1 Million Mermaid, published in 1999, Williams made a shocking claim. She said Chandler had proposed marriage to her but then admitted to being a crossdresser. This ended their relationship. The claim was explosive, it caught everyone and the media by surprise and quickly caused a storm of reaction. Chandler had always been seen as a strong, traditionally male figure. His tall build, gray hair, and deep voice helped to reinforce this idea. Chandler was portrayed as a tough leading man, so the idea that he might have a private life that was so different from that image was hard for many people to accept. Chandler's friends and co-workers in Hollywood spoke out quickly and strongly in his defense. One of the loudest was Jane Russell, a famous actress and close friend of Chandler's. She said, "Crossdressing is the last thing I would expect of Jeff. He was a sweet guy, definitely all man." Others in the industry agreed with her that they didn't believe the claim. Many thought it was exaggerated or misunderstood, and others thought it was unfair to make such a personal accusation public decades after Chandler had died and couldn't defend himself. Williams' statement started a flurry of speculation about Chandler's life that would last long after he died. In addition to his relationship with Esther Williams, Chandler had other relationships with women in the industry. He was romantically involved with actress and singer Gloria DeHaven, though they kept their relationship a secret. He was also linked to Ann Sheridan, another well-known Hollywood star. Neither of these relationships was ever confirmed, but they did add to people's interest in his personal life. What made things even worse was the height of the tabloid media in the 1950s. Magazines like Confidential loved scandal and weren't afraid to break the rules. In one case, detectives were said to have followed Chandler and Gloria DeHaven to gather information. At the time, it wasn't unusual for people to follow celebrities around, take pictures of them, and write about them without their permission. Chandler was one of many stars caught in this new wave of public exposure. The pressure from the press made Chandler's already busy and stressful life even worse. He had to manage not only his career but also how the world saw him. He had built a public persona based on strength, confidence, and dependability, but things were much less simple behind the scenes. Jeff Chandler's life was full of ups and downs, failed relationships, and growing stress over how he was portrayed. The rumors about his sudden death died down over time, but what happened next revealed a truth that was even more heartbreaking. Chandler had been dealing with chronic back pain for a long time. In May 1961, he went to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles for surgery to fix a slipped disc in his back. This type of surgery was common and thought to be safe. The physically demanding roles he played in movies made his doctors suggest the surgery to help his quality of life and allow him to keep working without pain. The surgery itself was supposed to be simple, but within days, Chandler's health started to quickly get worse. He got a severe blood infection called sepsis, which caused complications that his body couldn't fight off. On June 17, 1961, Jeff Chandler died in the hospital. The official cause of death was concerns about complications from surgery, especially an infection. The news shocked his fans and Hollywood. He was only 42 years old, in good health, and still working. How could a man who went to the hospital for a simple procedure die just days later? At first, everyone believed the official story, but soon, doubts started to grow. Chandler's ex-wife Marjorie, who had known him for years, said she was deeply uneasy about how quickly he had died. She said he was tired and stressed in the months before the surgery, but never seriously sick. The speed of his death didn't make sense to her friends and fellow actors, who were also suspicious. Some said they had talked to him right before the surgery and found him to be in good spirits. Rumors started to spread that something had gone wrong in the operating room, but no one wanted to talk about it openly. One especially troubling report came from a close friend of Chandler's. Entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. said that a nurse at the hospital had told him in private that there had been chaos in the operating room because Chandler had seizures during surgery and that the doctors and nurses didn't seem ready for what happened. The idea that something went wrong behind closed doors began to spread. Other people talked about Chandler's known allergy to certain medications, and people who knew his medical history said that he had told the doctors about certain medications. Early worries about Chandler's drug sensitivity, especially to penicillin, were mostly ignored or brushed off at the time. The hospital released a standard statement, and the story fell out of the news. But Chandler's friends and family continued to question the official version. They thought that something had been missed, ignored, or covered up. Years went by without any answers, but the mystery never went away completely. Then, decades later, Chandler's daughter Hamie Tucker worked to bring new information to light as an adult, she started looking into her father's medical history. For years, she asked for access to his sealed hospital records, sure that the truth was being kept from her. After a long legal battle, she finally got the files. What she found was very upsetting. Chandler had written on his medical forms that he was severely allergic to penicillin, but he was still given a penicillin-based antibiotic either before or after surgery. This wasn't a mistake, it was a direct violation of his known medical needs. The new records also showed that no proper steps were taken to watch him for allergic reactions before, during, or after the surgery. This mistake could have been fatal because someone allergic to penicillin can have anaphylaxis if they are exposed to the drug. Anaphylaxis is a severe and sudden reaction that can include trouble breathing, a drop in blood pressure, seizures, and loss of consciousness without immediate treatment. It can be fatal. Chandler did start to show signs of distress soon after the surgery. After taking the medicine, he started having seizures and bleeding internally, but hospital staff reportedly did not respond quickly or with the right treatment. The allergic reaction and internal bleeding were too much for his body, and within days he got sepsis, which eventually caused organ failure and death. The records also showed a disturbing lack of communication between medical teams. Nurses reportedly wrote down his reactions in notes, but those notes were not acted on quickly, and some files even showed confusion. Staff members argued over who had approved the medication. The most upsetting thing that came out was that Chandler's death could have been avoided if his allergy had been taken seriously. He probably would have lived if staff had been better prepared and communication had been clearer. Instead, a respected actor and loving father died because of carelessness and poor management in a medical setting that should have been safe. It was also clear why the truth had been hidden for so long. At the time, both hospitals and studios often kept things quiet to avoid scandal. Chandler was contracted with Universal Pictures, and his sudden death raised a lot of questions. The studio system had a lot to lose if the truth came out, especially about one of its biggest stars. It's thought that both the hospital and the studio tried to hide the details of Chandler's death to avoid legal trouble. Today, the real story of his death is finally known. It wasn't just a tragic accident. Chandler didn't die by bad luck, he died because people didn't listen and act when it mattered the most. As the truth came out, it also revealed deeper problems that Hollywood didn't want anyone to see. At the time of his death, Jeff Chandler was still under contract with Universal Pictures. He wasn't just another actor, he was one of the studio's most reliable stars. Studios loved to promote strength, honor, and traditional masculinity during Hollywood's golden age, and Chandler played important roles in historical epics, war dramas, and westerns that made a lot of money. Chandler's reputation was very important to Universal's brand, and a scandal about his death, especially one involving possible medical negligence or rumors about his personal life, would have been very bad for the company. At that time, studios treated their stars like investments, and Chandler had a lot of them. Universal had a lot of connections in the medical, law enforcement, and press communities. This gave the studio the power to control what was reported and what was buried. If that meant hiding mistakes or ignoring questions, that was a price they were willing to pay because public opinion was everything. As a result, Chandler's death was explained away with a simple, quiet statement about surgical complications. There were no public outcries. There were no investigations, no questions from the press, and no signs of wrongdoing. That's exactly how Universal and most of the other major studios wanted it. Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where Chandler had surgery, also had a lot to lose. It was one of the best hospitals in Los Angeles and had treated many famous people. A high-profile death caused by medical negligence could have hurt its reputation badly, according to information that was later made public. Hospital staff knew that Chandler had He was allergic to penicillin, but he was still given the medicine. This caused a severe allergic reaction that led to seizures and internal bleeding. He never got better, but at the time, none of this was made public. Instead, hospital records were vague, some reports were changed, and others were never filed. Important documents, like allergy warnings and nursing notes, were kept from the public, and Chandler's official cause of death, complications from surgery, didn't mention the allergic reaction or the lack of proper response. After that, these records were sealed for decades. Usually, families can't get access to private medical files unless they go to court. That's exactly what Chandler's daughter had to do years later. Only then did the truth about what really happened in that operating room at the time come out. Even though no one admitted fault, there was no investigation, and no lawsuits. The hospital wanted to protect its reputation, and the people responsible for the mistake got away with it, even though the official version of events stayed quiet. Those who worked with Chandler heard about what happened or at least parts of it. There were rumors that Chandler's allergic reaction caused the surgery to go wrong and chaos in the operating room. Some people thought it was negligence, while others thought it was worse. Almost no one spoke out in public, which is why back in the 1960s Hollywood loyalty was strong. People were careful about what they said, especially if it could go against a studio or challenge powerful people. Speaking out could ruin a career. When the industry's image was at risk, journalists weren't allowed to go too deep into stories. Investigative journalism also didn't have the freedom or support it does now. Private investigators, press agents, and studio executives all work behind the scenes to control the flow of information. Confidential magazine and other tabloids might have hinted at scandal, but they didn't point fingers at hospitals or big studios because the risk was too high. Some people, like Sammy Davis Jr. Most people who knew what happened chose to stay silent, either out of fear or loyalty. This silence allowed the cover-up to last for decades. What's even more heartbreaking is that Chandler's family didn't get answers until years after he died. His children grew up without knowing the whole story, and his ex-wife dealt with grief and anger without finding closure. The public also didn't know what was going on. Jeff Chandler's case wasn't unique. During Hollywood's golden age, studios often covered up DUIs, affairs, and mental health problems. Some hospitals, especially those that treated famous people, cared more about their reputations than telling the truth. But secrets don't stay buried forever, and Chandler's legacy would rise again in ways no one saw coming. Jamie Tucker uncovers the truth. For decades, Jeff Chandler's death was a mystery, clouded by vague explanations and sealed records. The official cause of death was complications from routine back surgery, but those who knew him best were never fully satisfied. Them changed into his daughter Haim Tucker. She turned into younger when he died in 1961. However, as she grew older, so did her need for solutions. What began as a personal journey to apprehend her father's final days had become a determined undertaking to find the reality and expose a failure that were hidden for far too long. Jamie Tucker usually sensed there was greater to the story of her father's death than what she was advised. Through the years she heard whispers from own family, friends, and Enterprise insiders. Some spoke quietly, approximately scientific mistakes, approximately something going incorrect in the course of surgical treatment. Others hinted at an hypersensitivity that had been disregarded, but there was no difficult proof. The statistics from Cedars of Lebanon Medical Institution, where Chandler had his surgical procedure, were sealed while his daughter Cy wasn't allowed get right of entry to. However, you did not give up. She started learning. She asked files, filed formal inquiries, and met with attorneys. She wrote to medical boards or even reached out to those who had labored at the medical institution back in the 60s. At instances it felt like she became hitting wall after wall. Establishments had been either uncooperative or had lengthy because moved on. Many records had been misplaced, archived, or intentionally stored out of reach for more than 2 decades. Haimie driven ahead with quiet dedication. She wasn't a celebrity or public determined. She changed into a daughter who had grown up without a father and without clear answers. Her venture wasn't about revenge or headlines. It changed into about fact and approximately giving her father the honor he deserved after years of petitions and legal back and forth. Cha sooner or later gained a leap forward inside the overdue 2000s. A court docket granted her request for access to her father's medical statistics from the time surrounding his surgery and death. The medical institution, under legal strain, had no choice however to comply. What you discovered was each heartbreaking and validating. The records confirmed what many had suspected all alongside. Jeff Chandler had a recognized allergic reaction to penicillin. That hypersensitive reaction turned into documented in his chart. Despite this, the drug turned into administered in the course of Or rapidly after surgical operation. The end result was an extreme hypersensitive reaction anaphylaxis which caused seizures, internal bleeding. And in the end his dying. There were additionally signs and symptoms of carelessness in Chandler's published operative monitoring. Nurses' notes referenced unusual reactions, however nothing became completed fast. Sufficient caution signs have been neglected and protocols have been not observed. Hamey also exposed files that counseled internal problem at the time, statements and memos that indicated group of workers individuals knew something had long passed incorrect, but instead of being investigated or acknowledged, those worries had been buried. For Jamie it became a painful discovery her father hadn't died from a few random surgical worry. His loss of life became the result of preventable clinical negligence. A mistake had been made and it had been hidden with the facts eventually in hand. Haim began talking out. She gave interviews to newspapers, magazines and documentaries. In every communication she reminded human beings of one component: he wasn't just a star, he turned into my dad. She pointed out how hard it were developing up without him, how the uncertainty around his loss of life created an emotional wound that never completely healed, and how even after a long time locating the fact added each comfort and renewed sadness. Her assignment had succeeded, however it came with the painful truth of knowing her father had died unnecessarily. In case you liked this video, recall to like, subscribe and proportion live tune for the following large Hollywood story.